Okay, so I want to talk about the temporality chapter for the rest of the day, and I would be happy to have help from everybody. I think it's the most confusing and confused chapter of the book, and that's really a tough competition to win by these chapters. And my intuition is that there's something, well, I will get to that if I get time at the end. I do think they're two very different phenomena in the temporality business, and that Husserl is onto one of them, and Heidegger's onto an entirely different phenomenon, and that they are totally and deeply incompatible, and that Merleau-Ponty holds on to both in the same paragraph sometimes, and therefore it is utterly confusing. Uh, but I think we should do some solid positive things before I try to express my negative thing. And everything hinges finally on trying to do something which, oddly enough, in this chapter, Merleau-Ponty doesn't really try to do. Or if he does, he becomes completely poetic and incomprehensible to me. Describe the phenomenon of our living in time. It seems to me I'm back to that again, a Husserl attempt to do it, and then a lot of Merleau-Ponty weird talk, which is his attempt to do it. But I think it's not that hard to describe, and so I'm going to try to do it. But first, let's just start where we start, from 476. So he wants to first, we're going to get rid of the first paragraph. That's not Merleau-Ponty. And that leads to a notion of time as a pure sequence of nows, and neither of these two use of temporality, the Heidegger or the Husserl one, think of time as a kind of clock sequence of pure nows. So we don't have to worry about that one. And once we try to understand what objective time would be, we discover, and this goes on from 477 to 479, you can't make sense of it. You can't tell whether it flows from the past to the present, or whether it comes from from starts in the future and goes into the past, and so forth. You got all these puzzles. You get out of these puzzles about objective time when you understand that time depends on us. You've got to be situated someplace in time to have a past, present, and future. I think that's like to say that in some way or another there has to be a now for there to be temporality, just like there has to be a here for there to be spatiality. And there is no now in objective time, just as there is no here in objective space. And if there is no now in objective time, then there can't be an earlier and a later than now. And so all the talk about whether time comes from the past or flows into the future or vice versa is gone if there's no earlier or later. So you can't have a temporality in which there isn't a now, and the only way to get a now into it is for us. We've got a now. But what the now is, or the present is the hardest thing in the chapter. But we do bring some kind of now and some kind of presence into the otherwise non-temporal reality, if there is such a thing even, which Merleau-Ponty, I think, thinks there isn't. That's all right with me. We bring it in, just like in space there wouldn't be a near and far and up and down and a right and left if it weren't for us here, and we bring that with us and that's how we make sense of space. And I guess to use the founding talk, the lived space with a here and a now is basic and the only way of giving meaning to objective space. Uh, by the way, to say this here now, you have to listen, right? I mean, remember I said that C.I. Lewis used to talk about the here now predicament. That's exactly the wrong way to think about here. That's to think that somehow I'm kind of imprisoned in my stream of consciousness, which is a series of nows located somehow right here. That's the other wrong. Their objective time doesn't make any sense without bringing us in, and inner time doesn't make any sense without bringing in some other notion of time. Because if there was a kind of just a here now, there wouldn't be any temporality. There wouldn't be any past and future. You can't just be a stream of inner states. If you were, you wouldn't know it. You'd be like an oyster or something. A stream of inner states needs to somehow not just be just a bunch of inner states. Some inner state has to be now, and other ones past and future. But you can't get that if all you've got is inner states that are now. Where will you get any experience of the past and the future? That's his objection to what he called the psychological analysis of time, trying to understand temporality, which has a past and a future in terms of a stream of inner nows. And it doesn't help to do it physiologically, he says, because then you'll have some engrams in the brain, which are supposedly recording the past, but they'll just be present engrams in the brain, and where does their pastness come from? That's the puzzle. So we've got all these happy puzzles, which I don't think we should spend too much time on. In fact, none. Not that they're not good puzzles, but it's important to see what his view is. So it turns out that somehow temporality has got to naturally be based on motor intentionality. Our experience that there is a past, a present, and a future is tied up with our way of coping with the world. And it's wonderful and surprising, really, to find the house in the back of the house coming back. Finally, when we get to Merleau-Ponty's own view, which is after he's shot down all these other views of psychic traces and physiological traces in objective time, his view starts at the top of 483. And the very first phrase I'm going to come back to, I think this is the phrase that causes all the mischief and makes no sense, but I don't want to start explaining it yet. But I want to raise the question. It is my field of presence in the widest sense, this moment that I spend working in so forth, that's how I make contact with time. Well, the question is sort of how wide is the sense of the present? And in what sense is it mine? I think that that's very hard to figure out. Here I am working at my table, as he says, and the night is coming on, and I sense the time is passing. What sort of experience is that? Is it, in what sense is it mine? In what sense is it, and what is the widest kind of presence? Well, now he starts to try to tell you things about it, which are very interesting. That there's this past, and there is this my present and my life and so forth. And finally, I think it gets really interesting about 12 lines down in that paragraph. Everything therefore causes me to revert to the field of presence. Already, keep your eye open. Is it my field of presence or the field of presence? What do you think about temporality? Is it your field of presence or is it our field of presence? He is so confused. So everything caused me to revert to the field of presence, that's what I think to say, as the primary experience in which time and its dimensions make their appearance unalloyed with no intervening distance. That's very important. That means that I am directly at the past and at the future. It's not something that I get at through something else. And this is Heidegger. When I think about not think about that, if you remember the past, the distant past, you have to do it by representation. But if you just turn your mind toward the Freiburg Bridge, as Heidegger says, you can be directly at the Freiburg Bridge now. You can be directly at the Freiburg Bridge yesterday. You have direct access to the past and the future. That seems right too about the phenomenon. It seems to me I have a direct access to having been in my office before I ran over here. I don't need to get it through anything else. But you can see how hard that is to believe that. But it's equally hard to believe that all I've got access to is some kind of present. What weird sort of present, I don't know. and something that's privately mine, that out of which I somehow get the shared time and the past and future time. I mean, one of the clearest ways, I'm just still thinking this out, so I have to keep saying it as I think about it. One of the clearest ways to see that something must be going wrong is if you realize that both Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty, when he's getting it right, understand that there's no problem about how my world is related to the world. Remember that. We open on a shared world from a perspective, but it's a shared world. And it's a big mistake. You can tell you're in Husserl and start, you have lost it when you start worrying about how you get from my world to the world. And yet, Merleau-Ponty constantly seems to sort of box himself into my time. And, and that's going to get him into serious trouble, I think. It's just not the phenomenon. I mean, I can't keep telling you, look around and think of it, feel time passing. It's not your time or my time that's passing. It's some kind of shared time that's passing. And it's not passing in the sense that it's all we've got is the present and the past and the future are gone. Then there's just a kind of transformation taking place where where the whole thing, if he says that he's getting it right, the whole thing as a whole budges all the time. There's the constant shifting around of what is the present, where the present is just the perspective on the past and the future. Or is it your perspective on the past and the future? That's all. It is so weird. Yeah. Yes. Okay. We're going to jump all over the place. I can see that I can't resist it because I'm still sort of so much inside it. That would already determine something crucial. If you ask, what is the present? And you say, it's the past. Now I'm giving a lecture, or now we're in the last week of the semester, or whatever. You're talking like Heidegger. You're talking the way Merleau-Ponty sometimes talks. And then the present turns out to be this expandable thing. In the widest sense, the present might be, now we're in the 21st century. Once you start making it relative to what you're interested in and what you're doing, the present stretches into past and future. And it's also shared. It's our task. It's shared. So now we're having a lecture in the Heidegger course. That's the present, I think. But you'll find Husserl and Merleau-Ponty getting into the idea that somehow the present is tasked. The task is irrelevant. Then what you've got, and he doesn't work it out very much because he shouldn't, but he buys it if he buys Husserl, that there is something like the specious present, some conscious, lived, more real moment in which things are passing out of into the past and other events are coming into out of the future. But this lived present isn't a knife-edge present. It's a present. I think it's an incoherent notion, but it's a present according to William James and Husserl. It has a little bit of an echo of something in it and a little bit of a beginning of something in it, but it's not past relevant. So that's a tremendously important question, whether you're going to define the now and what's present in terms of your task, your engagement, your involvement, which you expect Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty to do, or in terms of some kind of reflective inner, which is, I think, what Husserl does. And then you got Merleau-Ponty, who I think is cracking up over it. Yeah. Oh, I thought you had your hand up. Oh, Richard had his hand up. Yeah.
Well, I was wondering if there's some sensible way of understanding why phenomenology is space, whether basically I want to get away from the idea that it's completely incoherent, that there's my time. I mean, there's a sense in which when I'm I guess it's related for this idea of time. Time happens for you. It's someone like, in school in detention, time really happens to be.
Well, I think you're right. See, remember I said, too, I think they're really two different, or something like Don't think I understand this. This is just too complicated. I hope somebody understands it better and writes a paper on it. But I think there are two different aspects to approaches to temporality. If you try to describe what it's like to be fully engaged in a task, you'll get one description of temporality. But we also can sit back and reflect or listen to a familiar melody and have a kind of intertemporal experience in which something that's coming along comes along in its full presence and then goes out into the dim past. And that's true too. That's what I'm trying to say to you. There is a sense in which we do experience our own flow of time in our own inner sense. And now, how can they both be right? Well, now it gets really hard. That's why I think this is so confusing. I think they're both right if you realize that the engaged one is somehow then prior and founding, and that what you get when you reflect on the inner flow of time is a kind of what? I don't know what it is. It's let me see if I had a word for it. Well, it's derivative. It's not a discovery. When you find time in your inner experience and its flow in a task-free way, it's something you can experience on reflection, but you shouldn't think that that's the basic stuff out of which you have to constitute shared time, shared task, and so forth. And the basic thing I want to say is you have to realize that when you reflect on time like that, which is, I think, how Husserl did it, you distort it. You don't discover it. And that would be the Heidegger, I think, Merleau-Ponty intuition. But again, and maybe the chapter says all this, but if it does, I couldn't find it. It seems to say, in fact, all sorts of other things.
I don't see the conflict in the text. If you describe it,
There's no what?
Excuse me, let's finish for a second. When he says, um, when he describes Husserl's view, he does it explicitly by linking it to the notion of task and tools engagement.
He does?
Yeah, well, on my page 416.
Because Husserl does.
What he does, and kind of does his understanding of my 416 is your 483. He writes, present itself, this is just before the Husserl died.
I see where you are.
Present itself in the narrow sense.
I'll tell everybody, 6 lines from the bottom of 483.
Weaver, and are indeed there for me, but I do not explicitly perceive them, that's because of the back of the house.
Okay, and that's Merleau-Ponty talking in his own person yet.
I do not so much perceive objects as rectangles in an environment.
That's Merleau-Ponty.
I see supporting my tools and at my task rather than confronting it.
Right.
And then he explicates Husserl's idea as an amplification of that.
Yes, he does. I think that's just wrong. I mean, that's fine.
Right. Maybe it's a mistaken interpretation of Husserl.
Right.
If that's the way he's interpreting this,
right,
then evidence that he's endorsing Husserl is not evidence that he's breaking with
good. Okay.
And moreover, let me just say that
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a way of when you contrasted the task-oriented fit conception of future and past involving
Is his name for it too at the end? Yeah.
With the misguided, which is the psychologistic conception of future present.
Mm-hmm.
What I don't see is the evidence that Merleau-Ponty was attracted to that misguided idea of future present.
Okay, yes, I understand. It's got to do with saying every once in a while, frequently, he says, my present. And then it sounds sometimes like, like strict can be expanded. Maybe it always is. Okay, the important thing is to keep your eye on the phenomenon. And it is true that what he does is not only is it complicated because I think there is a Husserl tendency in it, but he's reading Husserl in an entirely different way, I think, than Husserl could possibly be read as he just read the lectures on inner time consciousness. That's what they're called. But he's doing it in a Heideggerian. He's reading Husserl in a Heideggerian way, and that's fine. So now the question becomes much subtler, as Alva rightly says. Has he making a coherent position, taking Husserl over and reading him in a Heideggerian way, or is he swallowing something which will mix him up in the end? I'm not sure. But one thing is sure, he's trying to take Husserl into a task-oriented thing, and at the very end of the chapter, as if he suddenly remembered it, he tries to say that we live in a shared time. He only says it once, I think, in the whole chapter. You'd think it would be one of the most obvious phenomena you would have to deal with, that my time is your time, and that there's only one time, and we're all in it. But he doesn't. And I think that's a sign that though he tried to take over Husserl into Heidegger, he didn't succeed. Because if he succeeded, then there would be just one time. In Heidegger, it's clear that it's just one temporality we've all got. It's called within kindness, where we all live together and have tasks together. There is a place, just I might as well say it because of the thick and because of the shared, right at the end of the chapter, to my amazement, because I was thinking he's never going to get it. At the very end on 503, that's about 4 lines from the bottom, the solution of all problems of transcendence is to be thought in the thickness of the pre-objective presence, which we can, is that what it's going to talk about, interwoven? No, wait, it must be here somewhere. Before there's a line very near here about the interweaving. Oh yeah, there it is, about 15 lines from the bottom. Well, let's read this, where it ends up. It'll help us know where we're going. The two temporalities are not mutually exclusive of our two consciousnesses, because each one knows itself only by projecting itself into the present, where they can interweave. That's not my present there. That's important. There is a the present. How does that relate to the my present? Oh, I wish we knew. As my living present opens upon a past which I nevertheless am no longer living through, and on a future which I do not yet live. Now, that sounds sort of like a living, streaming featured present to me, because if you could really open on a past the way Heidegger thinks you can, you're still living through it. Your past that even goes ahead of you, Heidegger says. You can change your past, according to Heidegger and according to Merleau-Ponty, because that's this retroactive reinterpretation when something goes wrong. He seems too much in his present there, but let's go on. Perhaps never shall I be, and on a future which I know not yet live in, perhaps never shall, I can also open under the temporality outside my living experience. See that? That doesn't make it seem shared and task relative, and acquire a social horizon, with the result that my world is expanded into when you start with my world, my hair stands on it, but my world, there's no such phrase allowable, is expanded into the dimensions of that collective history which my private existence, private, takes up and carries forward. I swear he's been channeled in Husserl and been possessed. The solution of all problems of transcendence is to be thought in the thickness of the pre-objective present. Right. And the thickness of the pre-objective present includes you guys, the task I'm involved in, the future that I am already directly confronting, the past which I'm also directly confronting. That he says the thickness in which we find our bodily being, our social being, and the pre-existence of the world. Good. So if you can get all the thes and my's, the private and the public, together as they are in that sentence, in a coherent way, you get an A plus, and I will take over your view. Okay, yeah.
Just as against the cracking up on this.
What?
It seems like it's exactly this sort of thing we saw in the chapter about other films, because there seemed to be like a perfectly easy solution, which was that we're open to a shared world. And Merleau-Ponty didn't seem to take it. He seemed to take a very difficult route to giving us a solution. It seemed like he's doing just the same kind of thing.
I missed the beginning. Where was this other one?
The chapter of other cells.
Oh, the other cells chapter. Yes, another.
Simple solution.
Right. Okay. Yes, you're right. I mean, I don't get it whenever he does that, and then I don't want to assign the chapter. That's what happens. But then it always seems when he does that he's come out. I just want you to understand where I'm coming from, and then you come from wherever you want. You'll have something to disagree with. I mean, whenever he talks like that, as if there's a big problem with other minds or a problem of a shared world. It looks to me like he's come out of the normal experience of our shared coping in the shared world as we're completely engaged, which ought to be the phenomenon he's describing, to some product of some kind of reflection in which he's now got a problem about how my world is related to the world, and then he has to solve it, and he always solves it somehow by waving his hands a lot, lots of metaphors until we're back in the shared world again. That's the best I could do with it. Olivia is, I especially asked Olivia to come because I figure that if anybody can save this, he can. Go ahead.
I think I was talking what you just said.
Talk on.
What what he tries to because the access we have to the phenomenon consider it as obvious. You sort of have this naive look at what happens again, which doesn't mean that you have the reflective perspective. I think that in direct relation to this, for sure, for Merleau-Ponty, there's no problem of how you can go from my time to the time, because of course my time, the time is mine. Because what it takes from Husserl is the fact that consciousness is itself the flow of time. So you're not sort of watching the time passing, you're living your own life is the time as it passes. There's no possibility for you to reflect upon it. It comes later.
That's true. Reflection is the wrong word. So I have to have a new word though. It's a kind, you can have a kind of disengaged time in which you are.
It's not disengaged.
What?
It's what constitutes the subject.
Yeah.
So it's not, it couldn't
I
be
think
more
could be
engaged.
disengaged. I think you're right about that too. Let me think about that. So.
This is why he talks about the time as transition synthesis.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yes, but these are the passages Merleau-Ponty is drawing on now.
Yeah.
And the thing he's putting forward and the way he's interpreting Husserl is that he relates the three horizons of time to the fact that we're embedded in the world. Because Husserl says that you have the present and the past and the future in the consciousness, and that then you have perspective and perceptive or perceptual horizons in the world. And so Merleau-Ponty, it's the same thing. The horizons of the world are the horizons of the actions that you might want to perform.
Yeah, well, I sort of agree with that, except
you always your world and your time because it's what you're doing. Even if it's at the same time as say you're listening to me and I'm talking and it's at the same time. The same time but I'm talking. My time I'm talking.
Suppose it's something we're doing, like having a conversation. Whose time is that?
Well, the access I have to the conversation is from my time.
And yeah, as long as one doesn't sort of reify the time, it's like the house. I mean, the access they have to the house is not through something special called the front or the Abschaltungen.
So you have a perspective on it always.
You always have a perspective.
Otherwise, it wouldn't be task.
That's right. But it's always a shared house, and it's all present at once.
But your perspective doesn't imply that you wouldn't want to consider it ultimately as shared.
Okay, well, here, let me say more about this. It's true that Husserl certainly wants. See, there are too many things happening at once, and we probably shouldn't be worrying about Husserl, but for a minute, because he does Husserl. Husserl doesn't bring in the pragmatic structure of shared time, and he gets out of it something like the living, streaming present, which is the speechless present. And Merleau-Ponty should have no place for the speechless present. And now what I want to say about Husserl is he says he's discussing time from within it, but he's getting a description of time, which is the kind of description you would only get if you weren't fully engaged in it, because you feel, you experience as, I don't know how long, a little speechless present that has in it all sorts of, let's look at the diagram. The diagram, Merleau-Ponty turns the diagram into something that he wants to say. That's fine, but do you understand the diagram? Let's just go into it. The diagram says that it's like boxes in boxes in boxes, is the way I think about it. That your present experience is the experience of something that was just before that a future experience, which contains in it already an experience before that which is not yet come, which is the future of that future. And of course, that contains within it an experience which hasn't come, which is the future of that future, and so forth. And then they unbox. The one of them becomes present, and then they start going into the past boxes. Then there is the just present but now past, and beyond that, the just present but now past, which is further past. And beyond that, the just present and now past is further past. Now, surely there's something right about that. But that certainly doesn't seem to get the picture of what it is when you're involved and sort of in direct contact with the future and past in an engaged, shared, or even individual project. Let me just read you. What? Why doesn't it get that?
Yeah.
Oh, because it's assumed that what's real is a very small bit of time, namely, it's not here. And I think
It's just the contrary of what you're saying.
well, he's got this living, screaming present, which is all
Say
that's real.
there is here not a multiplicity of linked phenomena, but only one.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm not disagreeing. I don't know whether we want to talk about Husserl, and which I just did. And now you tell me what Merleau-Ponty is saying. Merleau-Ponty has completely taken over the Husserl story and made it into what is almost right. That's what Al was saying. And if you could picture the whole world as gradually things are getting clearer and more determinate, and then they're very determinate, and then they're getting more indeterminate, though nothing, there's no slice in there called the specious present, in which for a moment the very determinate something is there, and everything else is there only by virtue of syntheses of and so forth. It never, in engaged experiences like that. I suspect you can get yourself into an experience like that. I'm not even sure you ever can. I don't know. The nearest you can that I can think of would be listening to a melody that you already knew. When you listen to a melody that you already know, you know that the future notes are already determinate and in sort of boxed there, and they'll get unboxed till you hear that note. And then that note will be a note that you already heard, and it's more and more boxed into the past. Well, I think it's no coincidence that Husserl writes the whole of internal time consciousness analyzing a melody, not a task, not something you're engaged with. And then you get this phenomenon, which Husserl describes. Now, it's complicated, and that's what Alvis says, but he never says anything here about specious present. He never says anything here about melody, Merleau-Ponty. That's right, because he's taking over the Husserl story into his own story, which could be right if it was a story about how the whole world transformed itself, always in a kind of flow from past to present to future. Then you'd get the same kind of boxed, unboxed story, but it wouldn't be unboxed into a specious present. That would be the difference. It would be unboxed as just the constantly changing perspective on everything. And Husserl could be turned into that. Let me just read you, by the way, where he goes through this diagram in a sentence or two, the way I just did, so you can find it for your own self. I thought I marked it. He actually tells the story. Huh? Maybe. What, not, yeah. Where? 9? 484? 484? I thought it was much later. And I miswrote down. Well, 44 is the diagram. Much later, he tells you the diagram in the way I just said it. Anybody know that?
Well, the next page?
No, much later. I think. I remember. 487? Maybe. No, but it doesn't matter because it just says what I said. I mean, and that's what Husserl says. And if you hear it a certain way, it's perfectly compatible with what Heidegger says and with phenomena and what Merleau-Ponty says. So let's try to hear it that way and see how far we can get. By the way, I have to stop and have a kind of moment of outrage about the translation. And that is, I meant to tell you last time, it's not only a question of outrage, but of apology. The translation is so totally wrong that it makes it sort of 20% harder to understand it. And I intended to tell you, and then we got so involved in my diagram that I did. The big mistake happens at the bottom of 483. And it's hard to believe. I thought it was just dyslexia. The Husserl terms are not protections and retentions. Can you imagine? And you could hardly see it. It's so crazy. But it's protensions and retentions. That isn't in the other English translation. It's a case of making it worse, but up to now they've just been little grammatical glitches making it worse. This is a disaster of making
They
it.
actually changed the translation subsequently this one as well. So
Really?
read out
Really?
Yeah.
Whoa.
very striking. The sentence you read on from the very, very end about the two
Yeah.
is not translated quite.
Which is better?
Actually,
Probably the old.
I think yours is better. I find yours a little bit easier.
I see. Well, anyway, I'm gonna, as soon as I get time, I've been too busy. I'm gonna call up the editor at Rutledge, and I'm going to tell him that they better fire this guy or woman, whoever this is, and they better not bring this out again until they get it fixed, or go back to the old one, which is generally preferable. But this is incredible, and of course, it's not just once. Whoever did it made a global change. It's all these protections, 3 lines down on the top of 484. But what even more amazing is, it isn't always a global change. 15 lines down on 487, you got protensions. So how this was done is beyond me, but I intend to get to the bottom of it and give you a report. But for the time being, didn't it confuse you immensely to have protections and retentions on you? What?
I just
You just don't see it. Well, if you read Husserl, you don't see it, but they haven't, so they see it, I presume. What did you think? Anyway, I'm sorry, and it just has to, you have to remember, I don't think there is a word protensions, is there? I think Husserl made it up. But we have a word retentions, and they come from what's already passed and what you're holding on to and retaining. So whatever you're projecting, it hasn't happened yet, ought to be a protension. So we invent the word, and then they undermine it. Now, having said that, I was looking for the verbal version of the diagram, but I won't bother. And certainly it's important, as Olivia and Alva keep pointing out, that if you just don't know anything about Husserl and read this the way he wants to read it, you can fix it. Notice the middle of 484 is a fascinating way to fix it. I want to say that, well, this is an issue I'm going to get to in a second. But he says, in order, right above the diagram, in order to make it complete, the symmetrical perspectives of protensions would have to be added. Time is not aligned enough. That's right. And Husserl doesn't have them. And he knows Husserl doesn't have them. And the question is, why doesn't Husserl have the protensions? And what would he do if you added them? Well, I think that's really interesting. And that's tied up with the house. It's just as Husserl doesn't understand the backs of houses, he doesn't understand the future. Yeah.
I just like putting it, I wanted to mention apropos of this use of the term transitional synthesis. That's exactly the term cited Husserl that Merleau-Ponty uses in the article primacy of perception when discussing the house example. So he really wants us, whether or not you agree with this reading of Husserl, really wants us to view the cases as utterly analogous.
A transitional
Then what's required to experience, actually this is related to my time, what time is. But what I would have said when you first sort of raised the challenge trying to reconcile that, is that part of it has to do with the dialectic of puzzlement. So there is a puzzle that needs to be explained about the way in which the unseen part of the house is present.
Absolutely.
So somehow, in order to indicate its absence,
Mm-hmm.
you need to say something about the limitations of your perspective.
Absolutely.
And I think that in privacy perception, what he eventually says, he talks about a transitional synthesis, whereby the whole is made available to one. And that seems to be exactly what he's doing here.
Well, I have to see that final state perception. I think it's a mistake on his part, if he does, to talk about, and he does make mistakes in that paper, the primacy of perception, because it's a kind of popular talk he's giving. The important thing, whatever words we use, the important thing is he wants to say that the back is present now, or I don't know, but now isn't the right way. That only complicates things. So when you're looking at the house from the front, the back is present. The back is present now. Now I want to say that. When you're looking at the house from the front, that's what you gotta have if you're going to do a Merleau-Ponty story about that. That means that you've got to be very careful and not think of time or objects as a series of, say, reified perspectives, which somehow have to be together. There's no stitching them together. The height is given all at once from the front, and time is given all at once from the present. But the present isn't something you can sort of mark off and delineate because it's there is no sort of pure present. There's the house from the perspective that you get when you see it from the front. If you think the front is like a facade that you can then sort of stitch the back onto, you're in the trouble of the girl on Telegraph Avenue again. So now he rightly thinks that it's that you got to understand the present, the way you understand the way that even the back of the house is present when you're seeing it from the front. So let's read that, because I think that's very important. That gives you the top of 483. Remember, I said the crucial thing is it's my field of presence in the widest sense. Now, I don't know about the my, but the widest sense is what this is going to be about. The widest sense is the way and the future are present to me right now. The way the back of the house is present to me right now. So everything therefore causes me to revert to the field of presence as the primary experience, I like to observe there, in which time and its dimensions make their appearance unalloyed with no intervening distance. That's important. And with absolute self-evidence. Even the back of the house is absolutely self-evident. Now you might want to say, yeah, but you could turn out to be wrong about it. Yeah, that's the way it goes with self-evidence. And you can turn out to be wrong about the front of the house when you're in front of it. Maybe it's going to turn out to be all a clever laser construction or a facade. But whatever it is, the back of the house is as present as the front because the whole object is present. That's what he thinks. So, with no intervening distance and with absolute self-evidence, it is here that we see a future sliding into the present and on into the past. I want to say, yes, the whole future of the world slides constantly into the present and on into the past. Nor are these three dimensions given to us through discrete acts. That's truly what we want to avoid, because it's a kind of flow. I do not form a mental picture of my day. It weighs upon me with all its weight. It is still there. That's the way the past is still there. And 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 he would say you could go back and open it up by thinking of by not remembering it. That would be, see, I better say this right now. There's a way of relating to the past and the future that both Husserl and Merleau-Ponty understand, and it's something we do. You've got to distinguish it from whatever it is that Husserl and Merleau-Ponty and Heidegger think has to do with the way temporality is, basically. That is, they're not talking about how you can remember the past and expect the future. That's representational. I can expect there'll be another election in 4 years. That's perfectly fine, but I'm not at that election right now openly. I have to get there only by symbolically representing it and so forth. I can remember that we had a lecture on this last Tuesday in which this stuff was a big problem, and that's representational. And it has conditions of satisfaction, and whether it really happened or not, and if it didn't happen, then it does, its conditions of satisfaction aren't satisfied. That's different than the way, and it happened, and we can do that. But nobody in the story is trying to discuss expecting and remember. They're discussing anticipating, which is the engaged way of relating to the future. And they're discussing, I don't know what the word is for instead of remembering, that is like a non-representational word. Does anybody know?
Like recollection.
No, that's even worse, I think. Recalling, that's not so good either. That's a little better. You could sort of call it as if it's still there. What? Reliving. I think that's another thing. That's what happens in proofs when you take the Madeline and you're actually there again. No, I'll go for recall. Reckoning is not about the past. Let's do recalling as opposed to remembering. I mean, there's no real distinction in English, I think, but we need a distinction. And this is what Husserl was trying to get at. They all agree about this. Protensions are anticipations. They're not expectations. They're not. It's a remember. What is it? What's called the operative intentionality. That is, it's an intentionality that doesn't have a mental representation related to something outside it. And so that's protensions is supposed to be getting at anticipation. And retentions is supposed to be getting at this something or other, which is still there in a way that you can have a direct access to it. It can be present to you, even though it's past. Now I can go back. Let's read this again. Okay, now let's see. No other dimensions given through discrete acts. I do not form a mental picture of my day. That would be remembering and expecting. It weighs upon me with all its might. It's still there, though I do not recall any detail of it. Recall, I don't know. I have that's probably chose with at least this translator thinks that's the right word. I have the impending power to do so. I still have it in my hand. That is what it says. That if you want to feel the unity of the book, say I still have it in my grip. That doesn't change anything. That have it in hand is an idiom. And have it in grip is just a metaphor that Merleau-Ponty is going to use for that. So my grip, which is as usual, the crucial issue, is I've got the past in my grip and I've got the future in my grip. In the same way, I do not think of the evening to come and its consequences, and yet it is there, like the back of the house. This is everything hinges on that house, of which I can only see the facade, or like the background beneath the figure. Our future is not made up exclusively of guesswork and daydreams. Ahead of what I see and perceive, there is, it is true, nothing more actually visible. That my world is carried forward by lines of intentionality which trace out in advance at least the style of what is to come, although we are always on the watch, perhaps to the day of our death, for the appearance of something else. That would be, an explosion of the noema, or that's what we're targeting. An explosion of your expectations, like the stone on the path, in which it turns out you have to retroactively relate to a different past. Okay, what's important here, and I don't know how important, but to me it's very important. Husserl hasn't got protensions. Why he knows there are protensions, he just doesn't put them on his diagram. He doesn't talk much about them as I recall, in the eternal time consciousness. That's because his view of the back of the house is that it has certain features that you know for sure because every house has like a wall. And it has other default features, like it has some number of windows. It's indeterminate. Well, indeterminate is the wrong thing. We don't know which number of windows. But it's a different kind of back for him than it is for Merleau-Ponty. Because for Merleau-Ponty, you notice it's the style. He said that before. It's something about houses in general, or Georgian houses in particular, which give you an already present, indeterminate back of the house that you're coping with now already, and that the sense in which it's present is that you already have an indeterminate sense of what it'll be like, and you have a sense of how you could go around and get a better look at it, and you're being called to get a better look at it, and the call is coming from the present, indeterminate yet back. We've seen that picture before. And the present, now let's go on. The present itself, in the narrow sense, is not positive. The paper, my pen, and so forth are there for me. I do not explicitly perceive them. I do not so much perceive objects as reckoning with the environment. I seek supporting my tools. And now he goes on and he gives you the diagram. And I have a feeling, this is now again a paper topic more for me than for you, I think. But I have a feeling that Husserl has a problem with protensions that Merleau-Ponty doesn't have, because he doesn't have the notion of the style of the future. or temporality is a style Merleau-Ponty says sometimes. And therefore, I don't know how he thinks about the future. Yeah.
Well, I don't know too much about what Husserl says, but it seems that one of the striking differences from Merleau-Ponty that Husserl probably doesn't have is motor intentionality. And so there's a sense of transition sense, but it seems like he wants to understand it in a more bodily.
Yes, good. And the way to see
That's where the anticipation is.
the way to see that is
Bodily.
and that's just try. I wrote down here somewhere about the doorknob, of course, which is the thing that's our favorite example of that. That is the way I am already, right now, coping with the doorknob as I start to leave the room, even though the doorknob is over there. It's part of my present. I'm already dealing with it now. And in this big now, the doorknob is included. And the same thing is how the past of the house is. I'm already dealing with it now. And Merleau-Ponty is saying, and he's attributing the Husserl review, which is fine, we don't care. I mean, and if Husserl held it, so much the better. And he's attributing the view that for Husserl, you're dealing with the past now, and you will be dealing with it forever, for a long time, and you're dealing with the future now, and you will be dealing with it until it becomes past, and then you'll be dealing with whatever that future is. All of this has got to be in there. Now let's see, where am I? Basic ideas of variation of Husserl, 43, contrast memories and retentions. Oh yeah, this just to tell you, remember I just went and made that sort of riff on the difference between a memory and a retention. In the middle of 485, he says, there are certainly identifying syntheses, but only in the expressed memory and voluntary recollection of the past. That is, in the modes derived from consciousness of the past. That is to say, there's a derivative representational kind, just to give you the place where he says it. So it's not representational, but like on page 486. Well, here's the operating intentionality, which he attributes to Husserl and Heidegger. And what the important thing is that it's a kind of motor intentionality that opens up a field, and it is a kind of openness to everything as present. That's the rich sense of presence, the wide sense of presence. Remember, the way that the back of the house is present is the widest sense of presence, the sort that in temporality, we want that wide sense of presence. We don't want any kind of specious presence. So in Husserl language, beneath the intentionality of the act, that's remembering and accepting, which is the static consciousness of an object, in which an intellectual memory, for example, converts us into an idea. We must recognize an operative intentionality. So he likes that. When he says operative intentionality, I take it he's equating it with motor intentionality, isn't he? That's what he thinks of, or isn't he? I mean, he does every once in a while, I think, try to do that, which makes the former possible. That is, there's a kind of intentionality that makes remembering and expecting possible. It's the kind of intentionality that's already at the doorknob. It's the kind of intentionality that's got anticipation and recall built into it, and which is for Heidegger's transcendence. My present outruns itself in the direction of the immediate future and the immediate past, and impinges upon them where they actually are, namely in the past and in the future themselves. Boy, that's a funny sentence. I hadn't realized. To me, that's like a sentence that says, in the middle of one sentence, a Husserl string and a Heidegger string. Why would he say the immediate? As if there was something, as if somehow talk about the house. That would be like sort of emphasizing the facade of the house, the front of the house. Whereas what he wants to say is sort of the whole future is already wrapped up in this. I don't know what immediate future means. An immediate past. What? Near. Yeah. But I mean, but I wish you'd said, I mean, immediate sounds so much like the future. expressed, it sounds like there's this special kind of future which will stop being immediate, whereas we all agree, and maybe he does too, that it shades off, that there's no clear thing called immediate
Yeah, I
future.
think it's kind of like a joke. Like if there is an immediate, so there is an immediate future and an immediate present. So we have to see that as part of that. There is an immediate past and immediate future, but we have to see that as part of the immediate present. And this is just kind of been part of this whole thing.
Yeah, that's what you think he's doing.
This is the thickness of time.
If this is the fitness, okay, and it kind of, namely, and it opens us to the past and the future themselves. Well, that's true in Husserl and that's true in Heidegger, because you could think that there was a specious present, which has just enough of an echo of the past that it opens you to the immediate past. I'm thinking of a melody now, and just enough of a sense of the, if you can have this potential in Husserl, of what's coming next, that it opens you to the immediate future. And that's, but he's taken it over. I'll go along with Rick. He's taken it over so that you have to read the immediate future as the whole future, and the immediate past is the whole past.
Not an immediate, an immediate present wouldn't outrun itself. One way of putting it.
I guess. I
So
mean,
that's the wrong way of understanding it.
but yeah, it's a funny sentence, because if the present outruns itself, then there isn't an immediate future. You're agreeing. It's a kind of joke. Well, I don't know if it's a joke or what, but it's a funny sentence. I didn't strike me as a joke. It strikes me as a bit of undigested Husserl, but I hope it's a joke. Did you get that? See, if it were a melody, you could see how that would make sense to say. Okay, I'm going to go on, struggle on. But see, okay, it's on 40. Oh, wait, I just want to see where I am. Okay, yeah,
Maybe I didn't fit it. I think maybe it was a very flat way to read that sentence.
okay.
Just in the sense that, the immediate future is the part of the future which is just going to happen. And the immediate past is things that just happen. Just as you might say, what?
That you still have in hand.
Yeah, it's just,
You still have it in hand,
it's just,
okay.
it's just music.
Direction.
So that,
Okay.
so the present outruns itself in that direction and in that direction. That's all he's saying. It doesn't seem to, it's, well, it says that you should.
Okay, I would, why not just say it outruns itself in the direction of the whole future? I mean, that's, I don't, what makes me nervous is, it seems to suggest that there's something special called the immediate future. Now, if, as you say, if the immediate future just means,
It's a little bit like the house, right? If the house is right in front of you,
right,
then there's a sense in which, the rear of the house is present. Now, but now suppose we're talking about the White House in Washington, D.C.
Right.
That's also there now. And if you think about it, but it's, you have to travel to go see it.
and that's an expecting, not an anticipating. You're not involved with the White House unless maybe you're the president coming back there for an urgent meeting or something.
Well, let's say you're president. Let's say you're sitting in Crawford, Texas,
Yeah.
and you're thinking about the paper you left on your desk,
Okay.
the Oval Office. It's present to you in some sense, but it's not immediately present. You can't just look. You can't just
Reach out and grab it.
reach out and transitionally
Right.
bring it. You have to get in your airplane and go there and see it. So it's a little bit less immediate. It's a little bit less immediate.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's fine. And it's still in your grasp, sort of, if you know it's on your desk and you know how to get it, if you send an aide to get it and so forth, and you can do that. But it's not in your grasp as much as the paper on the desk in front of you.
You have such a strong Husserlology that and but here you see him using motor intentionality and citing Husserl as an
Yes, that's what makes me so annoyed, because Husserl has no notion of motor intention.
That's the way he does it.
Yes, but he's taking over Husserl. I don't mind him taking over Husserl. It's just that it makes me just worried, because yeah, I think it probably makes it impossible to understand what operative intentionality really is, if you think that it's the same as motor intentionality. But I think motor intentionality requires a bodily engaged set, and listening to that melody, where there, well, if that's where we have this operative intentionality doesn't. So I would just like, let's take Husserl clear. I think Husserl's right about the way time is manifest as a phenomena. if not on reflection, at least somehow when you're not engaged in a shared task. And I think we should have that. I just think we should lunch them together. Yeah. Okay. Now, is there? I mean, I'll go along with that. I mean, is there a question in there? If there is, I'll try to answer, but I don't understand yet what the question is. Ah, well, I'm already dealing with, I'm agreeing with you, I think, in Merleau-Ponty anyway, I'm already dealing with the doorknob as something solid that can be turned and will get me out of the room. In that sense, I've already outrun any notion of something special about the present that I have to wait to get to the doorknob before I could cope with it or something like that. That I'm always, when I'm engaged in a task in a non-reflective way, I'm always already engaged with a lot of stuff that's not in some narrow sense present to me. And that's this wide sense, and the doorknob is an example of it. Then I think we should, if talking about immediate past and future is talking about the way the doorknob is present to me before I ever turn it, and will be present to me after I've left the room, then fine. That's all right. I'm not sure we understand each other, though. You're looking very worried. Oh, there ought to be, I see, yes. There ought to be room for surprises. Remember what I just read. He thinks there is when he says, where did he say this? That I'm always waiting that maybe something will go completely wrong. Where did I just read that? You know what I mean? And he says there's always getting a grip on things, but as you get a grip on things, you also 483. So I want to keep that built in for sure. Whereas, that something else could happen. Yeah, that's for something else. That's also in there. Not only am I set to deal with the doorknob, I'm set to be surprised when the doorknob doesn't do what it's supposed to do. That's built into the way I cope with things when I'm involved. Always have to be ready for a breakdown, I think. And I think that's okay. We'll have 3 minutes. Let me see if I can make sure that we've got what everybody. Oh, here's the doorknob on 489. See if I need to talk about that. Maybe it isn't the doorknob. Maybe I'm just reading the doorknob into it. Well, but I'm trying to interpret. So this statement, the passage, middle of the page, the passage of one present to the next is not a thing which I can conceive, nor I see as an onlooker. I affect it. I am already at the appending present, as my gesture is already at its goal. I am myself time, a time which abides and doesn't flow. And so, never mind, ever getting off the current. But that's the idea again, that I'm always already at the door, even though it could surprise me. Pretty strange thing, but that seems to be the phenomenon. Okay, let's see. So it looks like there could be just one big present, and I think that's how you come out with this. That's the field of presence in the wide sense again. Halfway down on 492. Of that nature then, of what nature then is that waking time in which eternity takes root? It is the field of presence in the wide sense with its double horizon of primary past and future. Interestingly enough, Albert, instead of immediate past and future there, he studies primary past and future. What's the difference? I don't know. Why doesn't he stick to one or the other? And the infinite openness of both fields of presence that have slid by. Why the plural? And it seems to me the whole point is that there's one constantly shifting field of presence, and this is what he's attributing to Husserl too, in which there are these dimensions of future and past, and they're constantly shifting. Why would there be a plurality of fields of presence? I don't know. I'm not even sure Husserl would. And then we are present to the world, the middle of 493. That's what you hope he would say. Now, who's he talking about here at the bottom of 492? I'm just telling you the things that puzzle me. So, a former experience, a 4 lines at the bottom of 492, a coming experience, in order that they may appear to me, need to be born into being by a primary consciousness, which in this case is my inner perception or recollection or imagination. I don't really even know why he said that, but it sounds awfully inner. It sounds very different than this widest field of presence in which everything is present. Uh, okay, I'm going to quickly try to, because they're going to throw me out of here, but I don't want to go back to it. So on 492, I don't quite know what to make of that, but we will leave it. On 494, there is at the bottom of 494 an unfolded series of presence. How can there be a series of presence if the presence is just this transitional? Whoa! Again, I don't even think Husserl thinks that there's a series of presence, so I don't get that either. And then at the middle of 495, very different. We consider everything that bears a significant relationship to our concerns at the moment as part of our present, thus recognizing implicitly the time and significance of but one thing. So that anything that concerns me right now is part of the present. That's like Bush worrying about having left a speech on the desk. That sounds right. And now I think I got to the end about shared time. So we've got this funny thing at the end, which I read, that there's the time has to interweave. It turns out that time does interweave, and that the thickness of time gets us in a shared social being, and so forth. But it certainly seems to have come out of a hat, as far as I can see, with no preparation. And that's it. I just tried to tell you why I'm worried about it. If you could always keep your eye on the phenomena is the moral. And if there's several different phenomena, keep your eye on the difference between the different phenomena. And if you don't, it's a mess. Well, it's a talent. I don't know. I don't know inside and you don't. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know it's formally. Will be voted $10 a day.
It's that sort of thought, yeah, so he wants to find a living for him, I would like for you to recognize. Body. Oh, why did I mean it? I'm on, because now I'm explaining your project. Now, he's saying you got to paraphrase, cut it up, fix all the translations, divide technical terms, and so forth, and then do it for service. You're going to find the best something. Only you don't describe the fact that you don't think that it's clear. But that's partly because where I read the phrase, how to permeated by the thing. But anyway, so anyway, he's done it. I was about to. Well, did you the whole book. The whole thing, the whole thing, right? The whole thing, the whole book. Why do they know people out? That time, that might be the worst time for you. Well, after what now? That's time for me, might be the worst time for you. When is, after you're qualifying? Yes, exactly, final. You're fine, oh, you're just confusing. Well, that means the 20th of June, is that right? That's the last year, okay, because you've gotta ask these people for money soon, because, oh, guess what, I fly to Paris on the 14th, I've got yeah, I would be yeah, but it'd be a month out, we don't have you already, started, but that's faster. Do you think it's happening to carry out, correspondence? No, I think it's just that we can do it faster. If we sit at the typewriter or the computer, because I'm dyslexic, we just start saying things, because I think we can do it in an hour. So we've already written this elaborate proposal, all we need is a cover letter from me saying how important it is and how reliable and intelligent you are. But can you come in for an hour or something? Yeah, I probably could. Tomorrow's Friday. Actually, can I do it after Wednesday? Sure, after next Wednesday. That's what you want. Okay. Yes. Yeah. Then it would have to be, I leave for Notre Dame early on Friday morning, that Friday. So it could be, but because I'm only, it could be Monday the 9th, because I come back from Notre Dame on Sunday. Monday the 9th. Yeah, that's good. Whatever, I'll be fine. Yeah. I mean, and we could do it from 3 to 4. Is that a good time? Okay, yeah, 3 to 4. I have another idea that I want to tell you. Okay. In case this family doesn't pop out, I thought maybe the French consulate would be interested. I'm afraid you have a view here. Maybe not from the perspective of trying to talk to like a people. It's not consulate job to promote U.S. French relations. They have like a so I was moving on. All the time. I wouldn't do this thing together. Why did they go on? So, that's not funny about the project. You know,
then so that it had coherence for the culture. So it's definitely that would be successful. Sound voting. But it's really like it's really very different. You know, up here too. Probably Mark too. Okay, maybe we're talking about that. But if we got to write a letter to the deadline, that's something you have to read.
Going to ask what practices that we learn your fall back in the code for the diagram. Left self up and down. It's like look there.
I think I want to put there.
I could plug it in as a question.
They belong as the background, but not the background. Hoping are if I see that historical so the historical background.
And then it becomes one you know. I think that's now they don't have to do reward it. You don't have to pick it up.
You're right.
Or
Absolutely right. So there's two backgrounds. One is hoping. There's a background that's still hoping.
yeah.
And then there's the historical shared.
Right. That's totally different.
That's a big factor. And I did leave out that factor. It doesn't pose a problem.
But I think that only to tell everybody that you can now in the multiplication now.
So the trouble is, it poses a kind of problem. Something that's coming from column
And
A.
the backside
column A.
it's not
Okay,
over.
I'm going to work on it. Okay, I see the problem. Yeah, that's like it's a simple problem. It's really very fine. And how the feedback there. I did say the foundation you could have without because that can be found way stuff with the learning. You know, if you get the without the and so then I got it. I'm the one who that's my so good. So I've always been not read into today. But it's just from the moment you see the way you feel. I think it wasn't the it's matter. Why do you feel that? Why? Because it's certainly still go over. I don't know. I don't know whether people use people. People. Make them home. Totally different things. I do. And what's over? How you can talk about it. Yeah, but that's really supposed to work. You use it. You can use it for that with the term. What the other thing that looks like all the time. That means there's everything. Not the two people volunteer or you think that when you use it for the obviously disagree with you on the phone. So let me say anyone who really now you can buck over. You know? So how could you do it? Well, I have that. If I got something, and then I think it's something. Well, it's not me. Yeah, but so the thing was, it's not cool. People think they can take the high school. You just think like they're, yeah, he wasn't do it. But my office hours. Yeah. Oh, morality. Seminar I gave last year. In China, went to temporality. It's true. It's not making any of those. You'll be using your using the you're just using those feelings. Yeah, I'm not just saying virtual. Yeah, and he certainly never talks about the secret present or the Wittgenstein present or the only the present is real, all these literal notions. But I maybe I feel so sort of residual ritual keeps coming around, and you swallow somebody else like that, you probably swallow a lot of stuff that you don't want.
I think what they're able to do
Good, well, things funny because if you get it,
is working. My time is because the point of the interesting time in general is that there's something running that you don't control that within time flows and but we have this point of interest. There's limited by this high time. The point of
okay.
if you start, you get like that. The time.
Right, so there's no
What it is.
there's a
It's what it is.
whatever okay, then I think okay. Yeah, okay, the nature of anything
Everything is the same with yourself.